Can't hurt to look.
Starlight and Twilight are not the same character. I actually got them mixed up.
You know, I'm showing this at the same time as the physics panel, but as it turns out, the real physics were right here.
Oh, them nuts sure do smell good. I've got the key.
Why did she say it like that?
I've got the pencil. Oh no.
An unhealthy obsession with a cartoon and an unsteady bond with the equally unhealthy people who share this cult-like obsession with me.
Uh-oh, looks like Trixie woke up on the wrong side of the hood. Better get out that family-friendly gat.
And you don't always have to bring up my dark past. I didn't know you had one, Granny Smith.
Oh no, trust me, Trixie, she has a darker past than you could ever imagine.
Oh, so proud.
Looks like liquid pride runs in the family.
You're nuts!
And this is how the UK helped win World War II, through the sheer might of their ships.
That's it. Yay!
The inlay card should take you to a roundtable podcast about Philly Forever that I'm a guest on. And if you came over here from that podcast, you should definitely subscribe. You should subscribe no matter how you found out about this video. This episode should have been about these assholes learning to take criticism properly, because believe it or not, there is an art to being criticized, and creative professionals need to understand that. Criticism has nothing to do with the critic's opinion. I love it and I hate it should mean the exact same thing to anyone in a creative profession with self-respect. All that an opinion of any veracity means is that the person giving it isn't interested in seeing you grow as a creator. The nature of criticism is presenting the facts that informed your opinion.
Of course. I heard them. Rough and irritating. And it gets everywhere.
Which Applejack did extremely well.
I wanted it.
Kinda depressing.
And Rarity seemed to understand this.
Oh, well, that's why you're here. Fashion needs a healthy dose of practicality now and then.
She has enough self-respect and intelligence to internalize AJ's criticism without getting fucking bogged down in her conclusion. These people, on the other hand, have no idea how to respond to a disagreement in taste, or even offer criticism, really.
Simply stunning!
AJ was selected as a judge to provide a purposefully unorthodox viewpoint.
Applejack is an unorthodox choice, but that is precisely what makes her an inspired choice.
See, look at this exchange of critical thought. Here is an aesthetic choice.
Putting holes in the clothes? On purpose?
AJ questions it, as is her purpose there.
Sometimes we designers forget about practicality.
It's to create a distressed look.
Inky Rose explains the nature of the look, but AJ explains why it clashes with her ideology.
When a pony's old clothes get holes in them, they don't want to go to the store to buy new clothes with holes in them.
Now, Inky defends her design in a way that would imply she expected to be judged by people who understand the industry shorthand. Distressed look doesn't mean much to AJ, but being able to explain a complex, specific idea to a layperson is pretty much a mark of mastery. So I would have loved to see Rarity come over here and help Inky explain why a distressed look was so fashionable in a way that even AJ could understand.
Okay, yes, not a very practical choice. Fashionable, but not practical.
But as I said, that's a mark of mastery. So the writer would have to know enough to pull off a scene like that.
Isn't it subjective? No.
But if they had gone that extra mile for a scene in a kids show that only critics and fashionistas would fully appreciate, would have made me even more let down by the way the episode ended.
You ruined the fashion show.
So after AJ fails to tell the difference between these two belts, no one even attempts to educate her.
Well, that one completely changes the look. This one complements it.
They just continue to talk to each other in their little insider code.
Ooh, both good choices.
Which makes AJ feel played, and I don't blame her. She's going out of her way to explain herself in painstaking detail at every turn.
She looks like a disco ball.
So when AJ declares fashion
Ridiculous.
it's hard to see her as in the wrong, because the other judges don't put any effort into defending their stances,
Makes a world of difference.
thus inviting derision. And then,
Come with me!
I don't know. Shut Applejack up? Rarity takes her to see someone with a difference in opinion.
Tell her how you feel about apples. Don't like them.
What?
As per usual, AJ states her case for apples,
They're crunchy, they're sweet, they're delicious.
and then Strawberry Sunrise states her case against apples.
I'm sorry, but you actually bite into those tasteless, mealy, worm-filled things.
And guess what? AJ ends up respecting her opinion because she made the point in a way AJ could at least understand.
Well, that's fine if she doesn't like them.
Or at least it would have if the episode didn't take a handbrake turn into shitville.
But if she knew how hard we worked to make our apples perfect, maybe she wouldn't be so mean about it.
Strawberry's reasoning would have made AJ realize their disagreement was based in taste, which should have tipped Rarity off that if Applejack can respect Strawberry Sunrise, then maybe, just maybe, these chumps can accept that part of growing as a creative professional is learning how to internalize dissenting or even polarizing opinions. But no, as it would turn out, the message is about how Applejack needs to shut her cunt mouth because she's being a meanie and that's wrong.
Doesn't feel so good, does it?
I mean, AJ was in the right the whole time, and yet her viewpoint is the one that's not reflected in the final decision. Fuck you, Kevin Lappin, you're a terrible writer, and I hope you bite the inside of your cheek or something equally unpleasant.
Doing excellent. I want to start this interview off by saying sincerely how much I love the show. This is one of these thrills for me, having you guys come in studio. I just want to say thank you. It's really, really cool. And we're out. That's all I got. Also, John Glass, as a fan of the so much that I didn't know. And it was just I wanted to know what was, talk a little bit about the genesis of it and how this whole thing came together and how it shaped.
Back in 2012, and I was at the convention in Las Vegas. I hadn't been to a convention in 13 years, and I was to see Avery Griffin. Of course, unlike these people, over the years, I haven't seen Avery for a long time. So I wanted to see Avery, and that's why I went. We had a great reunion. I was in a terrific mood. I was standing on the floor of the convention, and Dave Zappone, co-director of this doc, came up to me and said, I'm thinking of doing a Deep Space Nine documentary, and Bill Shatner isn't going to do it because he just did 3 documentaries back to back. He's not going to want to do another one. How would you, Ira Bear, like to be Bill Shatner and interview all the actors? And I thought I was in a good mood, I felt a real kinship again with the show, and without thinking, I said yes. And then I said, what's it going to be about? And what's the point of view? And he said, don't worry, we'll find it as we go along. And we did find it. He didn't tell me it would take 4 years just to find what the hell the doc was about, but that's how it came about.
Well, one of the things is that this was another one of those successful Indiegogo campaigns that the fans really chipped in to make this thing happen. And that sort of adds a little bit to, A, it's fan, it's really for fans, but B, you guys do some cool stuff in the doc in terms of showing DS9 in HD, and especially talking about what could happen in a season 8. Could you sort of talk about those aspects of the doc?
Well, I think it's to Ira's credit that he always had the fans in mind, and every time I got a phone call from him, he said, listen, we got to do a little bit more for the fans because they're throwing more money in the bucket here. So
you have to remember, when we did the Indiegogo campaign, we'd been doing the doc for a number of years already. It was originally a 1-hour documentary. That was it. I thought, an hour, how tough could that be, right? An hour, we could do that quickly. interview the family, and we're done. And even when we did the writers' room, that was 2015. That was 2 years before the Indiegogo campaign. So we did the writers' room when I still thought it was going to be an hour down. So how are we going to fit it all in? Don't ask me. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And then Dave came to me in 2017. He had gone off to do the Spock doc, and I hadn't been in contact with you guys for a while. I was up in Scotland doing the calendar. And he said, listen, we have to finish off the doc. We need some music, a score, have to hire a composer, we have to do some and for $150,000. I said, can we make that? Will the fans pay that? I don't think so. I don't want to ask and then not get, it's going to make me feel horrible. He goes, we have 30 days, we should do it. We should make it in 30 days. I said, okay, better not be mistaken. And 24 hours we made, 29 hours we made 150, I think.
Well, I think something that the Indiegogo campaign did that we weren't expecting was it changed the framing of the documentary. We had gone into it thinking it's going to be an hour film, it's going to be stuff we've already filmed, but we had no idea that the fans would be so adamant for something more than that. We kind of thought, it's a cult following, it's a small group of fans, they're underground, they don't really follow the show anymore, and we were blown away that there were 10,000 people in a very short amount of time that we barely publicized the campaign. They came out and they said, no, we absolutely want to see this. We want to make sure you get through not just your first funding goal, but we want to see Deep Space Nine in HD. We want to see Deep Space Nine animated. We want to see everybody back together. So that forced us to not just sort of settle for what we had been talking about already, but actually make it into a feature-length film and to do about 50 new interviews. And that campaign allowed us to do that. And do everything that we wanted to do with the film.
One of the things I want to touch on, and I have a lot of questions about the show, I swear, we're going to get there. But one of the things that I absolutely loved about the documentary was thinking about what could be the season 8. And before we get into that, there's so many shows that they come back, if you will, because of the popularity. And I'm just wondering, is there any possibility at all that, and how does it work with the legal, with Paramount and stuff, of doing anything with these ideas that you came up with for possible season 8, whether it be comic book, animation, live action? Is it even possible?
Number one, I just want to make it clear that was not the intent.
Yeah, but it was still awesome.
I get it, and we wanted it to be entertaining, but at no point did I expect or want anything to go beyond that one day of getting the guys back together and breaking an episode. I just wanted to see what that would be like, and I thought it would be cool for the fans. We already have been asked, back in the day if we wanted to do a comic book graphic novel, and I said no. I don't want this to go anyplace else unless they would put on a full season of Deep Space Nine or do a feature. I don't want it to be a novel or a coloring book or anything like that. That was not the intent. We did one day. If we came in for a second day, a lot of what probably was there would change in little ways, like we did whenever we broke a story on the show. This was an exercise to entertain the fans, and to me, that's good enough.
Sure, it really worked.
And as far as the novelists have been pretty good. I admit that I don't read the novels, but I've been told that all of our characters have been expanded on by the novelists that put out Deep Space Nine novels every month, I think, with Paramount Books.
I loved the practical sets that you guys had, and they looked so. It's one of the reasons why the show looked so believable. Is it just looked like a real place. What would surprise people to learn maybe about those sets? If there's anything, any secrets you can share.
They looked massive, but I think people would still be surprised if they walked on how elaborate they were and how huge, and the promenade. And it was easy, especially after 16 hours of work, to believe that you're looking at the stars, and to believe that we're in a space station. It was it was really remarkable. The sets were beautiful.
I had worked on Deep Space Nine and other shows, as we all have. And when you go on those sets, the regular sets are divided into little beehive comb things. And as Nana just said, when you walked onto Deep Space Nine, it was the promenade. It wasn't divided up. The distance from Quark's Bar to Odo's was always the same because it was that distance. It wasn't divided up. I remember the first day that I worked on the set, I was gobsmacked at the creation of it. That there it was. It was a world inside this building.
I didn't get down to the set a lot because we were just so busy, 26 episodes a year. But when I did go down to the set, I noticed something really odd. I never quite done being in ops. You know, ops did not make me feel comfortable. It was the Cardassian architecture, I guess. It was not a welcoming place, ops. But Quark's, Quark's was a bar, and I really believed it was a bar. And if I could get in there and kind of hang a little bit, even if they were shooting not in Quark's but on the promenade or something, and I was just down the set watching, I always try to kind of hang out in Quark's because it just made me feel more comfortable. It's really odd.
One of the things about the show that I still can't believe is nowadays doing 22 episodes of any show is next to impossible. No, I'm saying a normal show, 22 episodes. You guys did seasons 2 through 7, I believe, were 26 episodes apiece. How the F did you pull this off back then, and how much, when you reached episode 20 or 21, were you ready to just like punch a wall, in terms of, because all the makeup, trying to do all this?
These guys had it really the hardest. It was, I don't know how they did it. I did it for a couple of shows being completely covered in rubber. And you have to talk, at least I did, I had to talk myself through the day. Not to panic. I don't know how you did 7 years.
Well, mine was easier than Armin's because Armin did all the episodes. I just came in and did my occasional turn as Garrick and then left for a few weeks, and my skin would have time to heal.
We did it because we were professionals and we were expected to do it. And as Bobby once said to me, we expect you to do miracles. But the miracle is not the people on the set. And I don't need to kiss up to you anymore, so I'm not doing it for that reason. But that they created 26 different episodes a year out of whole cloth, out of the thin air. That is amazing. That is amazing that they could come up with as creative a scripts as they did continually, and never, to my mind, rehashed anything really. With all due respect to the shows that followed us, I sometimes would turn to my wife when watching one of the other shows and say, I think I did this episode. Because it was very similar to something I had done.
Completely. The other thing you guys did as a show was you had these storylines that would run through the season. The Dominion War. The list goes on, and I, in the doc it talks about how Studio Resistance. It's amazing what you all did way ahead of the curve, and I think it's one of the reasons why it stands up in the era of binge. That when people come in, because you were many years ahead of the curve. So can you talk a little bit about coming up with those overarching storylines and the resistance maybe you got from executives?
It got easier to do because at some point I told the writers, forget it, we're not writing the show anymore for the fans. We're writing the show for ourselves. We seemed so lost in the mix of other Trek series and the movies, and we were so marginalized, or at least we felt marginalized, and we made that into a strength. That's how I looked at it. It's like no one's watching anymore, not as closely, so let's do what we want. And Mike and Rick, they created the show. I had nothing to do with that. They created the show, and that pilot, there were just so many elements of that pilot that were ripe to run with, and I felt like I'm going all the way with all of them. We're gonna make this, we're going to make this show
Maybe there's something we can use.
different. The pilot was different. The show's going to be different. And sometimes there was support, and sometimes there was a lot of pushback. And, someone asked me earlier in the day if I was ever concerned that I was going to get fired for all the arguing that went on during the show. And it never even crossed my mind back then. If someone would have wanted to fire me, nothing would have changed. Let them fire me. At this point, I knew what my mandate was, and I needed to enjoy the show. I wanted the cast as much as the cast was able to enjoy the show. There was nothing much enjoyable about being on that set all the time in that makeup, and so that was the deal. It was easy to go serialize because we were doing it for ourselves.
I don't know, I don't remember what the ratings were back then, but how was it each year scared shitless about getting renewed? Or did you feel like it was, you know what I mean? And how was it through the whole show?
I remember having this debate with Renee all the time. Renee came from series TV, and he was concerned about ratings. But we understand we were the second in an experiment about syndication. So ratings wasn't all that important, at least to me. Maybe it was to you, maybe it was to the rest of you, but not to me. And I remember having a constant argument with Renee, him always saying, I wonder if we'll get picked up. I said, we'll go for 7 years. I said, TNG went for 7 years. That's the magic number for syndication. So I don't think, I can only speak for myself. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't have 7 years' work unless I really did something ridiculously stupid and they decided to kill me off, which they did in one episode. So thanks to you, thank you very much. But that was, and in fact, early on, do you remember? Early on, I think it was like the third or fourth episode, because our contract said they could get rid of us after 2 or 3 episodes. Do you remember this conversation?
I do.
It's about the time that I said about the 20 years
Yes.
as well. Because we were thinking, we have to do well or they'll get rid of us, because our contract said they had a choice up for about 2 or 3 episodes whether we were going to stay or not.
I worried about getting fired. I mean, I thought about it, but I always thought I was going to get fired because I was always pushing the envelope. So, and I knew that there were people who found her too much. But I felt like Ira. I felt like here was a role that for a woman, it was like the cage door had been left open. And I could either walk carefully out or I could run, run out of the cage. And that's what I felt like I did. I was going to run, and if they, shot me down, so be it. But I'm going to run. I'm going to run for it. That's how it felt. But I knew there was risk.
No, I came in like, Andy the actor with his lunch pail. I had no expectations. I got hired for an episode. I assumed that the check was going to clear the bank, and I did my episode, and I walked away thinking I would never see this thing again. And then they kept on calling me back, and then it was the oddest experience of my professional life. I've never had one odder, where a job started with such low expectations, and especially I was up for Odo. I didn't get Odo, so when they called me back to do an episode, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to come to the audition. Irene said, "You've got to pay the bills. Go to the audition." Got the job, did it, had a very nice time. And then this thing grew to something where, what year are we in, 2019? Here we are, we're still talking about this mother.
When did you realize your character became a fan favorite?
I never knew my character was a fan favorite, honestly. But I did know that my character was a writer's favorite. That's when I knew I was onto something. And it was an episode in the second season called The Wire that I realized when I got the script, and the writing was by a guy named Robert Wolfe, right? Yeah, and the writing was wonderful, and it was these arias, and these demented, insane, drug, addled arias that the character was doing. That I realized, oh my God, they like this character. I think I'm going to be around for a while.
For you guys, who took home what from set and why?
I got nothing. Rene Aubergenois got everything. Like he came out there with his screwdriver. Did you see him on that last day? Oh my God! It was like the Visigoths sacking Rome, for Christ's sakes.
All I will say, and I will say no more, is last week, Joe Longo, who is the property master on Deep Space Nine, gave me the beckoning finger and walked me into his property shack and said, whatever you want. And unfortunately, I've since learned better, but at the time I was very selective. But there are things I have, or I might have, because I don't know what the statute of limitations is on this, but I have some things that have meaning to me. I mean, I have this gentleman's head, and I have an Odo mask that are prominently displayed. The first thing you see walking into my house is his face, is the right there in the entranceway in a little glass case is a quark head.
I wish I'd been nicer to Joe.
I know. What's painful is that they said, do not take anything. Do not take anything from this set. But you saw them just ripping it down and throwing it away and just taking it away. I guess they weren't throwing it away. They were cataloging it for Ira Stephen Barron for Renee. I mean, this is what I'm thinking now.
I wish I could have kept some of the set pieces. There are things that I would have loved to have.
What's this here?
That's what I wanted.
Sort of careless. No, wait, I don't know.
Not to mention a certain staff that you have as well.
We don't talk about that.
Take home anything? You'll need a mic.
I did not take anything home. Not that I didn't want to, but Nana's right that we were told not to. But more importantly, really important, I mentioned before about stepping onto the set for the first time. And that memory still is with me 25 plus years later. And I did not want to tarnish that memory. I did not want to see that incredible creation in disrepair. Luckily for me, Doug Drexler, who was one of the scenic designers, when he heard that I had nothing from the show, very kindly gave me a artifact from Quark's Bar, which hangs in my office. But I personally did not, and I'm grateful, enormously grateful, I never saw the promenade in disrepair. I never have to live with that memory.
The show is now on Netflix. Have you noticed when it started streaming that all of a sudden a ton more people have now watched it and their reaction to it?
I knew the moment. I didn't know the moment it started streaming, but the moment it started streaming, I was at a convention and a 15-year-old boy came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I've got such a crush on Major Kira." And I was like, "What? This is a whole different generation. This is weird." And it started this wave, and I realized it was because it was streaming and people could see it the way it's best meant to be seen, binge watching it, where you can really see the arcs and what the writers were doing so brilliantly.
Also, at a convention is when I first ran into a young girl whose parents and grandparents were fans, and that made me feel really weird.
Yeah, you know what's weird? A young man brought his daughter named Kira, and he also brought a picture of himself in my arms when he was little. Right?
I'm all, wait, what?
Yep.
That's yeah.
It's mind-blowing. It's really cool.
One of the things about the doc has some footage in HD, and what I've heard that it's a real challenge to get Deep Space Nine remastered in some sort of HD. Do you know? Is it possible? Is it something that's being pursued, or is it sort of stuck in this weird time and era from when the production was made?
Well, we can say it's definitely possible. We remastered about 22 minutes for the film, and it's a very time-intensive and expensive process. And because of the time and expense it took CBS to do The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine has kind of always been not as possible as that. A lot of the effects were done in CGI. They have to be completely redone. So it's an additional cost from what they've gone through in the past. And I think it's an expense that they are not yet ready to make the leap for the whole series. But I think when people start seeing the footage and see how it modernizes Deep Space Nine, how it brings it to, I mean, you could be watching something that is airing on TV nowadays. We talked about the sets before. I mean, seeing the stuff, the low lighting, the very dramatic and specific lighting they were using, which was different, frankly, very different at the time, I think, than TNG or Voyager or any other things on a brightly lit ship. I think when people see that, they are going to change their minds, and hopefully, the powers that be will consider that, and we'll take a look again at it.
A moment that will stand out in my mind from the many years we were working on this doc was walking into the post house and seeing Jonathan West, who's the DP, the DS9 DP for the last 5 seasons, and they were doing color correction on the HD, and he was looking up at a monitor. I don't remember. It was actually one of these two guys. It was either, I don't know if it was Andy or
it was someone with makeup.
It was Andy or it was Armin. I can't remember now who it was. And he was literally looking like this. He was like a little kid in a candy store. He was so happy. And what he said, his exact words were, I always knew it could look like this. I always knew when we were filming it, I knew how good it would look. And we never achieved that. They never did that on the DVDs. But finally, I'm seeing what this show could look like. And he was so happy. It was such a beautiful moment. And, the HD is definitely an eye-opener. That being said, it's easy to spend other people's money. And, I don't have to, I'm not responsible to CBS Digital or CBS anything. And there's definitely people within that organization who would love to see it remastered, the whole thing. We have a lot of people in our corner, but of course they don't control the purse strings. They're the creative ones.
I wonder if there's a way, and this is me spitballing, but I wonder if the streaming numbers on Netflix or these other companies, you know what I mean? I wonder if there's a way of getting a streaming exclusive on one of the things, whether it be Netflix, whether it be Hulu or Amazon, and them helping to contribute to the remastering costs to have the exclusive rights.
Wouldn't you need a spokesman to be, or a group of people to say we want this? I don't think Paramount, the true Ferengi, could, or CBS, wouldn't do this on their own. You need someone with some vision to be able to say we should do this and look at the streaming numbers.
Yes.
And it's not going to cost you as much as you think it's going to cost you.
Yeah, but that's the reason why I'm saying if one of the streaming companies wanted to take one, you know what I mean? But I don't know what the contracts are, but listen, everyone's looking for content and reasons to tune in. I'm curious, so there were 26 episodes in a season. How often did the storyline of the entire season, how often did it, I would imagine day one you guys are figuring out the arc, or figuring out where it's all going to go. How often did it change along the way in any sort of dramatic ways? And for the actors, I'm curious if there was a lot of collaboration with any of the writers, or if it was always, here's the script.
It was pretty much always, here's the script. But, for me, I mean, because of the writing, I only one time did I ever, question things. And that was in a scene with Armin. And it was Armin's fault. He was the instigator.
Yes, I was an instigator. We'll talk about that later.
Well, I have a question. Well, we can also open that door, but please go on. I had a part 2 for you.
I agree with Andy. We, the best words or letters that we could hear on this set was from Judy Brown, our script coordinator, who, when we finished a scene or a sequence of scenes or a shot, we would all turn to Judy and wait for these words. And if she said, DLP lovey, then we knew we could move on. DLP means dead letter perfect. That means we had said it exactly the way the writers wanted us to say it. Because if we didn't do it that way, for the most part, it meant another take.
All I'll say is this. Every season, I would come in, the writers only had 2 weeks off a year. Towards the end, the last 3 seasons, they rebelled, and I gave them 3 weeks off. So I would come in, I would know kind of in the broadest way possible the shape of the series, the shape of the season. But I always assumed, and I always tell them that I expect everything to change by mid-season because we're better. The season will just get better, and the season will tell us what it has to be. If I knew the exact end of the season at the beginning of the season, then I would feel we're not doing our jobs, that the show is kind of moribund and isn't teaching us anything. They agree.
People in the other room were watching, and they agree.
But certainly characters like Garrick and Damar, when those actors and those characters came into the scene, I'm sure you didn't know where they were going to go when you created them.
Absolutely. Damar, as we say in the doc, he had 2 lines. I just happened to know Casey from other things, and I knew he was a good actor, and I said, and plus we needed someone. We were so Cardassian dependent on Mark Limo, and I wanted to give him someone to play off of who was Cardassian, as opposed to, he had Jeff, but that wasn't really, enough. So that just worked out. Garrick, I always say Garrick is the only character, and obviously, yes, with The Wire and other things he deepened, there's no doubt about that. But Garrick kind of came out of Pete Fields fully formed, in that we knew that he was a man we were never going to know, that he was. Well, no, that we knew with that character. He was the closest of someone who kind of was nailed almost immediately from our point of view. He was a perfect starting out point of the recurring characters. Others, it took some time to see exactly what they can do and how much we needed them. But Garrick definitely was an exception.
One of the things I found fascinating in the doc was learning that you would have people over on the weekends to rehearse and go over things. And I wanted to know, when did that first get started? And it's so unusual. Talk a little bit about what would happen at those rehearsals.
That did happen, and it's a great tribute to the other actors, Andy, Renee, Max, even Wally Shawn, would give up their weekends to come over to my house. I think they just came to visit my wife, basically. But they would give up their weekends, or at least one day of the weekend, to come to my house to rehearse lines, talk about specifics, to discuss what the arc of the scene was, what were the intentions of the scene. And most actors would grumble at the fact that they're being asked to rehearse without being paid. None of these people ever did that, and there's a great credit to them. It was a spirit of the show that all of the actors and the writers created, of wanting to do the very best work possible. And out of that spirit of wanting to do the very best work possible, they gave up days of their weekends many times, dozens of times, to come to the house and rehearse. It has a little bit to do with what Nina said. We would normally have anywhere from 10 to 16-hour days. Those of us in makeup had longer. Not that you didn't wear makeup, you had that little thing, which is another story. That little thing. I'll tell you about that later. But we realized that come 11th hour, 12th hour, brain dead. We were brain dead. Living inside, as you said, living inside the makeup was stultifying and difficult. And so we needed to rehearse because we never knew what was going to be the last thing shot. So we needed to have that rehearsal to depend on when we couldn't think anymore, that we, like doing a play,
We had it in our bodies.
We have it in our bodies.
And you mentioned, and we were talking off camera, but did any of that rehearsal impact dialogue on set or impact certain scenes in a way that you didn't expect?
Andy referred to one episode which Ira was a part of. It's at least one of my favorite stories. I think it's one of Andy's as well. After one of those rehearsals at my house, where Andy and I came to realize a relatively comic scene had a great deal of depth to it, and innuendo, and subtlety, and we came to realize that here were the two Machiavels on the ship having a discussion about Starfleet, comic Machiavel and serious Machiavel. And we began to realize that we were talking in code. We thought the characters were talking in code. And we came to the set, Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it was, and presented this approach to the director, Jim Conway. And he said, this is a comic scene, you can't play it that way. And it's the only time that I put my foot down, and he helped as well. And said, we really like to play it the way we want to play it. We see more depth to this than perhaps you're seeing. And I'm sure Mr. Conway was taking his marching orders from the writer-producers. And he very smartly and wisely, sagaciously, said, I have to leave this up to Ira. So I believe you and Robert Hewitt Wolf came down to the set to see what this disagreement was, and for them to come to the set, as Ira said, they were busy. They made time to come out and take a look. And Ira asked us to show us what we had decided. He said, can you do it the way Jim wants you to do it? I think we made a half-hearted attempt at that, Andy. And in a matter of seconds, I don't think it was more than 10 or 15 seconds, Ira turned to the director and said, shoot it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those stories that I find fascinating, because obviously it had a tremendous, meaningful impact to definitely to Armin, because we've spoken about him over the years, and Andy as well. And to me, it was, they had to remind me of it, number one. I hadn't even remembered the incident. And when they mentioned it, I recall.
Andy and Armin who?
It was such a no-brainer. And I pretty much know what Jim was dealing with, because I would have the meetings with the directors, the tone meetings, and a lot of the times I would talk about the scenes with the Ferengi, and I would try to get this character humor out of them, and a lot of the directors had not a lot of comic experience. We didn't have, with the exception of Renee, I'm hard-pressed to think of a director who had a lot of comedy chops in his resume, which was always frustrating to me. So I always gave that speech, and I think Jim took it extremely seriously, because he wanted it, it wasn't about the words were the same. It was all about intent and intention, right? And so when I saw the difference, I mean, it was night and day. I mean, it wasn't, there's still a lot of humor in the scene. It's just very subtle, and but it was just like, same thing with Nana. Nana will talk to me about something that happened that she felt was like such a big to-do, that, I was called to the set to talk to her about it, and it seemed so minor compared to, like, the fights I was having with other people, not actors.
Paramount.
Yeah, so it just seemed like, these are little bumps along the way, and we'll just straighten it out, and it'll all be fine. But
well, because we were all on the same side, fighting for the same thing. We just wanted it as truthful and good as it could possibly be, which is what you always wanted too. So it was a collaborative. They were collaborative arguments. I always felt like they were collaborative arguments with you.
Yeah, except you did say, here's something you're not asking, but this is my
bitterness
favorite.
is about to come. Here comes the bitterness.
What was? I should have said this. Other people asked this, and I forgot. What's the most surprising thing that came out of this documentary? what blew my mind, the one thing that blew my mind more than any other, it was during a discussion we had back in 15, right, in Vegas, when we had all of the main cast. I was interviewing them all at once, and this woman over here said, well, when Ira came down to the set, it was like another suit coming down to the set. And
that
she
awful?
said it.
It's
and
an awful phrase.
And she meant it.
I did.
And it was like, I thought, I was a suit? I thought we were all on the same, we were all a team together, whether we always agreed or didn't.
That didn't mean...
makeup, then you would not be a suit.
Oh,
that
man.
no, but that a suit didn't mean you were on the other side to me, but it meant a certain kind of authority, for sure, for sure. Yeah.
But it was a creative authority figure, I would hope.
Yes.
But that's not a suit.
I know.
I know it's just words, but words are.
No, I got to tell you something. I see both sides of this. You were the boss, and ultimately were making big decisions, but at the same time, you were so invested in the characters in the show that you felt like you were one of the team.
Absolutely.
I totally get it. Listen, I have like 79 more questions, and I'm effed. So, because I'm already being given the wrap-up signal, but I have to ask you one other thing real quick. I love the series finale, and I'm curious, when did that get figured out? And for each of you, talk a little bit about what your thoughts on the series finale and what it meant to you.
When was it figured out, Ira? Do you want to deal with that?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean in terms of what the story was going to be.
In terms of like how you figure, because listen, a series finale for a show like this, it means a lot because we've been so invested for 7 years. You're curious what's going to happen to Cisco and prophecy and all that stuff. So I'm just curious when it all came together for you guys.
Well, those last 10 episodes, we were so jazzed. We got, talk about a second wind. So we were all like, we weren't thinking so much about this is the end and the finish line and we're tired and we can't. It was like, wow, this is great. So breaking the story was just another story that had to be broken, and we gave it its due. It was a 2-hour important ending, and I knew there was not going to be a feature, and I wanted everyone to get an ending of some sort. The thing that drove me crazy was, what was the last shot? Where do we? And for all year, I kept saying we're ending. We have to end in Quark's bar with Quark. He's the bartender. He's the last. He's the continuation. No matter whether we're on the air or not, Quark is at that bar. And all through the season, that's what I said. But as we got to the ending, I was driving myself crazy. I said, is that because the thing with Cisco and not having the captain around, and I was going nuts, and my wife said, I'm taking you up to Santa Barbara for the weekend, and you're going to relax and stop thinking about this goddamn show, and you'll figure it out. I said, I don't know. And so we spent the weekend up in Santa Barbara. Nothing came to me, and I was driving home. I was on the 101 on the PCH driving back from Santa Barbara, and boom, right there, as I'm looking at the windshield, I see Kira and Jake standing out looking out the window. It's all about family. It's about the son looking for his father. It's about the son alone, but not alone, because it's still the family at Deep Space Nine. And it was like, and I said, honey, I just figured out the ending. And she said, well, it took you long enough. It took you weren't here all weekend. So that was an amazing final epiphany. Yep.
The last episode is a tearjerker because it's the end of a wonderful, glorious time. But if I have to pinpoint one thing, because there were so many flashbacks of things that had happened in previous episodes, for me, the most memorable and the most moving part of it was watching Sirach grow up in the flashbacks. Because I was right, it was a family. At times dysfunctional, absolutely. But
Tell me whose isn't.
yes, exactly, whose isn't. But in each of our small ways, and Avery did more than all of us put together, but each of our small ways, We all helped bring Sirach up. And to watch him mature from that young boy that started in the first episode to that giant of a man at the end, it's not just the physical change, it was the maturity. And to this day, I am in awe of Sirach Lofton. But to watch him grow up on camera, that to me takes my breath.
For me, I was the happiest. I'd never been happier in terms of a working situation that last season, and because of the storyline, which I was blown away about, and the transformation of the character of Gary. Really, and the space that I found at the end, and there's a playing space. There's a psychic space that, when good writing, connects. And at the right time, and you're able to expand yourself as a performer, as an actor, and it was throughout the entire series there was that space that constantly was growing for me, which is one of the great things about doing a piece for 7 years. But that last storyline, which just I sailed with that. I just opened my wings and just flew.
I wept for 2 weeks. I couldn't stop crying. I even messed up shots because I just burst into tears. It was really, really hard. It was like being from a village, from the time you're born, it felt like, and then being told you have to leave now. Just start walking. Don't know where you're going to live, but this isn't your home anymore. It felt like being turned on. It was so hard.
I, again, have about 100 other questions, but you guys have to go do other things. I'm just going to say sincerely, again, how much I loved the show and how happy I am you guys all came in, and I recommend the doc to everyone. If you've never seen the show, but especially if you've seen the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes.
Especially because there's such surprising things. Even us, when we saw the documentary for the first time, we were gobsmacked at what we didn't know.
Completely.
Whoever would have thought that of all the